shock wave going out would be enough to knock people off their feet as far as Macon, Georgia, if that was where the epicenter was. Yeah, people at trading posts as far away from the epicenter as Macon, Georgia is from this were knocked off their feet. People sitting on chairs were knocked over when the blast wave hit. So it gives you an idea of the strength. Now, why this is so important is that what has been discovered by studying the population distribution of these size of objects suggests that what happens is that what we're seeing here is a single random event that is not completely real. It may be that there are Tunguska swarms out there. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to back that up. Swarms of Tunguska. And it could be that a swarm of Tunguskas has had major effects on civilization without us knowing it, because a swarm, you could have 1,000 Tunguskas, but they don't leave craters. But if you had the Earth encountering a swarm of Tunguskas over a matter of several days or several weeks, it would be like an all-out nuclear war, and its consequences would be devastating. Now, we've barely touched upon the mounting evidence that there are, in fact, clusters of objects the size of Tunguska or Tunguska that may be only counted literally in the thousands. We'll quickly move past this.
I suppose you saw the article about a week ago, the guys saying that their Tunguska was probably a lot smaller than they thought, so there may be many more of them.
Yeah. Would you tell that?
Well, that's about it, isn't it? That's all I know.
Did you hear what he said?
No, loud.
Well, the figure that we've always used, like I said, was around 140 or 150 feet. And I've heard about the study that he's talking about, but I haven't read it, so I don't know the specifics of it. So just tell us what you know.
That they now think it was about half the size, and therefore there are a lot more of them, and that they may be more common than originally thought.
Mm-hmm. That's not good news.
No, not at all. But
That's not good news. Jeremy, we only want the good news, though.
I'll shut up for them.
Okay, this clearly demonstrates the relationship. What meteor stream are we looking at here?
Leonids.
Who says what?
Leonids.
Elizabeth, you're right on things. This is the Leonids, because there is the constellation of Leo marked out. Yes, the Leonids. Okay, and here you can see this is a time-lapse photograph, so it's very clear if you look at these and you trace these paths back to their common center, it actually turns out to be right almost dead on Regulus. So I feel a strong affinity for this particular constellation, and in fact this meteor shower, because Regulus is almost dead on my ascendant for you astrologers. I had my astrology chart done twice, and they both said my ascendant was almost marked by Regulus. I thought, that's cool. I like that. It was only years later that I appreciate the significance with the Leonid meteor shower. Now, the Leonid meteor shower, there's three, in my opinion, three meteor showers that I believe the evidence supports the conclusion that they were intimately involved in the affairs of human beings, i.e. causing social and cultural and natural catastrophes. One obviously is the one we've just been talking about, the Taurids, but the other one is the Leonids, and the third one is the reach back. What did you say? Well, the Pleiades is associated with the Taurids, but they're not. The Pleiades are the stars that are way out there, so it's not the Pleiades, but that was a good guess.
Draconids.
The what?
Draconids.
The
Draconids. The Draconids. Right. What about the Draconids? Now you guys would have to go back a year to dredge that up.
The Great Fires.
Right, October 8th. They peak on October 8th, the dates of these great fires in history. Right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Peshtigo.
Peshtigo. Very good, Jerry.
You get a star, Jerry.
You get an attaboy, Jerry.
There's a table.
I've shown you this, but I got to show it to you again. This was taken by a high school student skipping school, I think, if I remember the story. He was outside with his camera, and he heard a hissing sound and looked up, and this thing was coming through the atmosphere, burning up.
Now that would be scary.
Well, you can understand when we haven't gotten into this in one of my programs. Well, maybe it is this one right here we're looking at. I've collected all of these eyewitness accounts. Going back, if you go back in the old astronomy literature from like 1850 to 1950, monthly astronomical notices. I forget, there's 3 or 4 of them. And every month they would report eyewitness accounts of meteors. I don't know, they don't really do that anymore unless they're really spectacular. But every month people would write in these letters and talk about these fireballs and meteors that they had seen. So if you go through this old astronomical stuff, you can read these first-hand accounts of what people saw, and it's amazing stuff. It really is amazing stuff. I mean, you can't read that and then go read sacred writings like the Bible or the Vedas or even the Mayan stuff and not see the parallels. I mean, the parallels are so striking that you begin to think, well, you read the book of Revelations, and what they're describing in here is not something purely on a visionary level, but actual events that people were collectively experiencing. But typically, people thought, when they begin to see multiple fireballs, they thought that it was the end of the world. That is one of the most common reports that you'll hear over and over and over again. These fireball comes in, and it creates, for one thing, when they come in, they create sonic booms. And they can create multiple sonic booms. So oftentimes people will be in their house and all of a sudden they'll start hearing a succession of booms. And then they'll run outdoors and then they'll see something like this in the sky. And frequently the descriptions are that when the thing passes overhead, it appears as if the sky opens up. Like in some cases, people have described it almost like as a scroll opening up. And then once it passes, the scroll rolls closed again. Or somebody's described it almost like the sky got unzipped, and then it got zipped back up again. And when you go and you read the ancient accounts, they're so striking what these people are describing in, for example, the apocalyptic literature, that it sure, to me, becomes obvious that we're talking about the same thing here.
What you said a minute ago about hissing, that's another reason to think of the symbology of the dragon or a serpent.
Yes.
If it comes in hissing.
Right, and when you read these accounts, that's one of the things that's, again, very commonly reported is there's a hissing sound, followed by a succession of booms. I've shown you this. This shows the orbit of 2 of the Taurid meteors, but they define, see here they're coming towards the sun this way, coming around this way. Here's the Earth. Earth's orbit is right here. So the Earth is going around like this. The meteor stream is moving this way. The Earth in this position is looking at spring equinox. If you look there, there's Aries right there. So when you have Aries, the Sun, Earth lined up, that would be spring equinox, about March 22nd. The Earth is moving from here over to here, takes us to late June. If we move the Earth from here back to here, we're late October, early November. So when we're coming around this way, we pass through the stream with the stuff coming like this. If you look at it, it appears out here that they're coming from the Pleiades, which is out here in space. And this is the Halloween meteors. And then the Earth comes around, right about now, we're a little month and a week or so past Halloween, a couple of months. So the Earth is going to be in this part of its orbit. Come March 22nd, it's going to be right here. Come next late June, it's going to be passing through the stream again when the stuff is coming this way. And you can see that if we're passing through and the thing is coming from this direction, it's going to appear as if it's coming from the direction of the sun. And that's precisely where the Tunguska object appeared to be coming from that morning of June 30th. And this is all of the scientific evidence and research showing how the Taurid meteor stream and Enki and Tunguska and all of these other things are all related. But we're not going to spend our time on this. This would be something that I can give to you guys that want to read this on your own in more depth. It's all here with the sources. Okay, here we go. Here's a beautiful Taurid fireball that was photographed.
That's the kind of thing, right, Randall? All that text that'll be on the website, and then people that become members will have access
Yes.
to all that to read
Yes.
all those things.
That's right. That will be on the inner chambers. Okay, here we have a painting that's estimated to be 14,500 years old. It's Taurus the bull. Right there, 3 stars of Taurus. Here's the V shape of Taurus, the constellation. And you know, how many of you can recognize, how Orion is out there with the Taurus, the bull bearing down on him. Here's the belt of Orion, and here is the bull bearing down on him, and right here is the Pleiades. Now this is typical. This is one example of a number of these bull effigies that have been found painted in the Ice Age caves. At this point, no one has proven conclusively that the reason that they were so keen on painting these images of the bulls and creating these maps of the sky, well, for one thing, it tells us then that at least certain associations of the zodiac are that old. 15,000 years old, which in itself is pretty darn amazing. But the other thing is that, it may very well be that these people knew that something associated with Taurus the bull and the Pleiades was dramatically affecting life on Earth at the time. And one way of their commemorating this connection that they had made was by painting these bull effigies in caves where, when they were taking refuge from fireball storms, they had nothing else better to do except paint these paintings on the walls. And why, you think, would people spend so much time deep in caves? Probably for the very same reason that they find heterogeneous bone deposits in caves all over Europe and in North America and South America, where you have totally incompatible species of animals whose mortal remains are found accumulated together in caves where they died together. And you can imagine, from what you saw with that picture of that fireball, imagine that there's hundreds of those things in the sky over a period of days or weeks. Where would you take refuge? In a cave or deep underground?
A question I'd like to see what you can answer. Let's go back 15, 17, 18,000 years ago.
Okay, let's go back.
Let's go all over the world.
Okay, I'm there now.
And we have no, damn it, we have no communication except it may take a year to get to someplace, but yet there is a universal concept of the 12 signs of the zodiac all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
Well, because that's the other side of the coin. One side of the coin, we've got this great catastrophe. In fact, series of catastrophes that we know have happened. On the other side of the coin is the evidence for advanced civilizations that may have been global in scale. And I'm perfectly willing to accept that as a working hypothesis, that there were advanced civilizations global in scale. And all trace of these civilizations have disappeared because of the extreme nature of the catastrophes that have ensued between our time and their time. Clearly, I think, look at all the evidence that we've been looking at in here about systems of astronomical orientation of the earliest buildings that we have extant. The systems of geometry that is uniform all over the planet. The systems of measurement, of metrology that is uniform all over the planet. The systems of geodesy and geodetic orientation that is uniform all over the planet. In the oldest works of architecture we see extant, going back 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years and even older. Well, now when we recognize the Burkle Crater event, and I knew when I first heard about that a year ago that it had to have been something, if it bore out, and the evidence supported that this event really did happen between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago, it had to have been the most significant event of the Holocene. Well, now some studies have come out in the last month or two, and I was going to try to get those to bring them tonight, but I'll try to get them in 2 weeks. A couple of scientists, and I don't remember who they are, but I have the reference written at home, have been doing some estimates on the severity of an event, a bolide falling into the Indian Ocean, big enough to penetrate 2.5 miles of seawater and still gouge a hole 12 miles wide in the bottom of the ocean. What kind of climatic and various other effects would that have on the planet? And by their estimates, the devastation and destruction triggered by an event like that could have been enough to wipe out 80% of the global population.
May I ask a question?
Now, when we started these talks 2 years ago, none of this information had even come out yet. So when I'm looking at the flood myths, I was going all the way back to the Ice Age, right? And I still think that that's extremely valid. In fact, ultimately, I believe that what happened at the end of the Ice Age would have been more catastrophic globally than the Burckle cratering event of 5,000 years ago. And the yardstick that I use for that is the number of species of animals destroyed in these events. And we know that, over half of all the species of animals on the whole Earth, over 100 pounds in body weight, perished at the end of the last ice age. Okay, since, as you're going to see, a big part of what the Mayans were concerned with was the Taurid system. That's why I'm spending enough this time reiterating the specifics about it, because only when we know the details involved are we able to then go and look at some other symbolical system and see how they might have used that symbolical language to preserve this kind of information. This, as it says, probable debris from the giant Progenitor comet. This is the comet that I was talking about that perhaps came into the solar system 25,000 years ago. And you can see how many things there are that are associated with it. These are all separate meteor streams. Well, you've got the southern and northern Taurids, the beta Taurids, the zeta Perseids, the Piscids, and Orionids. They're all meteor streams that appear to be related as part of this one greater system or family that we call the Taurid system. And then there's 2 active comets that are within that system. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 known asteroids. And notice the size of these objects. They're all a few kilometers in diameter. So if you're talking an object that's a few kilometers in diameter, that's an object that would be about comparable to the Burckle crater event. And the Burckle crater event is something that was basically just discovered last year by the finding of giant tsunami deposits around the coastline of the Indian Ocean, and tracing those tsunami deposits to a center and discovering that there was then a crater on the bottom of the ocean. So the object that created that crater would have been in the size range of these objects right here, a few kilometers in diameter. And then 4 events, impactors on the Earth or the Moon, after they put the seismic, after Apollo program left these seismic monitors on the Moon. Between 1971 and 1977, there were multiple boulder swarms that slammed into the Moon that were parts of the Taurid. And some of these, now none of them were the size of Tunguska, but some of them were like the size of automobiles to school buses. Now can you imagine a swarm of 3 or 4 dozen things like that coming in? Now somebody witnessing that would certainly think, well, the end of the world has come.
Would that would that create the dells up in North and South Carolina? That create the dells up in Canada?
The Carolina Bays?
Right.
Very possible. Very possible. The Bruno object, that was a giant fireball that blew up over Czechoslovakia and scared the shit out of people when it did. And then, of course, the Tunguska object, 1908, which, so now after tonight, hopefully you all will be thinking about this next summer. And if you pay attention to the, I'm sure that the astronomy media will be coming out with, the 100th anniversary of Tunguska, and it'll raise lots of interesting new discussion. People will be discussing, well, what was it, what caused it, etc. Could there be another one? And if so, when? And the answer is, could there be another one? Most definitively, yes. There not only could be, there will be. Probably well within the lifetime of most people in this room, is what I predict. And when it does, we're going to see a major shift in people's priorities. As if, Katrina and all the rest and the tsunami, and the Indonesian tsunami 3 years ago wasn't enough. As if the multiple impacts at Jupiter in '94 weren't enough. As if our knowledge of Tunguska itself wasn't enough. As this possible impact on Mars. Aren't they saying that the Mars impactor is about the size of Tunguska, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yes. Very interesting. See, it's almost like the cosmos is setting this up. We're almost like getting remedial lessons here in cosmic consciousness. No, we are.
What about warnings?
What about what?
We're just getting warnings.
Warnings. How about warning shots across the bow of Spaceship Earth? Saying, okay, humans, time for you to wake up and realize what's really going on, and for you, the human species, the only ones down there on that planet that can do anything about it, to recognize what's going on. So this is all of the material, all of the evidence that I've gathered together, and it's some darn interesting reading. And here you see the sun, and there's the radiant of the beta Taurids, which would be where the Pleiades is, and Z represents where in space the Tunguska object came from. So you can see how close it is. Let's go back to where we left off on our last talk.
I know that cosmobiology thing is pretty interesting.
Oh, it is. Okay, so what is Zeus doing? He's hurling that thunder. Now, the image that they used for the thunderbolt is very interesting. And we encounter that other places than just Greece. And I don't know if I have it in here or not, but you will see at some point. And I think I have it here coming up. But in the astronomical sense, we know that this image of Zeus hurling the thunderbolt is perfectly appropriate. Because Jupiter, the planet, does exactly that with the comet and asteroid thunderbolts. We've talked about the bucket brigade, right? The comets being handed in from the Kuiper disk, and the exact geometric spacing of the planets turns out to be optimum for setting up a pipeline, feeding a pipeline of comets from the inner zone of the Kuiper disk outside of Neptune right down to the center of the solar system occupied by the sun.
So what is that? A ear of corn, or what is he holding there?
It's the Djorje.
You're getting there, okay.
Well, I'm hoping that it's here. I updated this, and I haven't looked at it since I've updated it. But I think it's in here. Aha! Yes, it's here.
It's got a Buddhist.
Look at what Buddha is holding.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
He's holding the image of it's the Djorje, the thunderbolt, that was wielded by Indra. And Indra hurled the thunderbolts, just like Zeus hurled the thunderbolts. And Buddha is holding the Djorje, which was the thunderbolt, the Tibetan Buddhist symbol for the thunderbolt. And it's very, very similar to the thunderbolt effigies as depicted in ancient Greece, which...
It doesn't really look like a thunderbolt.
No, it looks like an electrical device
No, it doesn't.
with
In
positive
reality,
and negative.
what it would really look like.
Well, yes, because here's Zeus, and you see what he's got. He's got his fist wrapped around this object, which is bulbous at the end with 2 points on it. It's connected by a shaft, very similar to what Buddha's holding there, except that he's grasping it in the middle, about to hurl it. And the symbolism is very, very similar. When you read the myths and stories about Indra, and Indra doing battle with the cosmic dragon and hurling the thunderbolts, the parallels with Zeus doing battle with Tiamat, or with Typhon, the cosmic dragon, are just extremely striking. And they were both wielding the thunderbolt as a weapon against the dragon. And we see that the actual shape of the object in both cases is not identical, but very, very similar. Again, that there may have been a common progenitor for this particular symbol of the thunderbolt.
It's interesting too because the Djorje is like a symbol of the masculine part of the cosmos, and the bell on the other hand is the feminine. And it's like you have to go into the cave to protect yourself from the masculine. Does that make sense?
Well, let's see. The last time I was pursuing a maiden, yes, I believe she did run into a cave, and I had to.
No, seriously. No, because they're holding it in the right hand, and in Buddhism, you know, that Djorje is considered masculine. So if the masculine is going to destroy the planet, then people need to go into the caves to save themselves, and the right hand...
Going into the, well, that's how the Hopis put it. They had to go into the womb of Mother Earth.
But in the Buddha, on the left hand, they're holding the bell, which is a symbol of the feminine, hence the cave to protect oneself.
Ah, now that's, hold that thought for about a month or two.
Oh, I hate doing that.
Okay, the bell. Yes, the bell. That's very, very important, the bell.
Yeah.
Because the bell is a symbol of salvation in a certain way.
Right.
And the way the bells were used in the rituals, I think, ties in because, but that gets us off track.
I know, I just thought it was...
But it's
interesting.
very important and very interesting because, yeah. Well, you remember when I was talking about those objects striking the moon, the post-Apollo, the swarms of objects?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll only mention this, and you can go with it where you will, and then it's because it's getting off on a tangent, but it's an important tangent. Okay, when an object strikes the Earth, or you have an earthquake, you have a nuclear explosion, below-ground nuclear explosion, it creates seismic waves. And those seismic waves, there's P waves and S waves, and they'll go around the planet several times. Even the Tunguska object, when it exploded, it created a air pressure wave that actually passed completely around the planet twice. Now, and then of course the second time it passed the barographs in England, the pressure had diminished considerably from the first passage around. But a nuclear explosion will do the same thing. It'll make several circuits around the Earth. But a source of vibration input to the Earth will usually damp out within a matter of a couple of minutes. So that, you know, it's just, if I strike this wall here, it vibrates, but the vibration damps out within just a mere fraction of a second. Now, if I take a mallet and I hit a bell with it, it's the exact opposite. It vibrates for a very long period of time, right? Well, compared to the Earth, when these objects struck the moon vibrated for hours and hours and hours, which was completely unexpected to the lunar scientists who were looking at this, at the duration of time that these seismic waves were vibrating through the moon before they were damped out, causing some of the astronomers looking at it to say that when the moon got struck by these objects, it rang like a bell.
It was hollow inside.
Yes, Jerry?
One little detailed footnote to that. The Tibetan bell isn't played with a clapper. It's the same as a bow around the edge.
That's nice. No, seriously. I've heard those bells before, so I know what you're talking about. I remember hearing somebody doing that somewhere over the years. That was very entrancing.
We've had a couple of people here that played the bells.
I'm sure. All right. This is just an example of a lot of the type of stuff I've assembled here in this, is that we haven't really spent much time on, but these are, like this is from the history of Japan that was written down in 1728. And when you go through like these ancient accounts, what you begin to soon see is that from all over the world, from all different times, people use the same metaphors to describe their experiences, to describe the same objects, the same images, the same type of symbols to represent what they observed or what they experienced. And here the main thing we're interested in is that they're talking about there arose of a sudden in China a violent storm of thunder and lightning. Comets, fiery dragons, and uncommon meteors appeared in the airs, and it rained fire from heaven. Now, typically science is not studying the relationship between weather and the encounter between Earth and stuff from space. I predict that this will be the future of meteorology on Earth. That even the day-to-day weather is being affected by things that are encountered in the atmosphere. But in any case, what we find over and over and over again in the traditional accounts is this connection between, the weather and what people are seeing in space. And in this case, they use something that's come to be one of the most common symbols to represent meteorites and fireballs and comets, which is dragons. And some of the others, like this is from an account in AD 69, according to Josephus. Amongst other warnings, a comet, one of the kind called Ziphius, because their tails appear to represent the blade of a sword, was seen above the city for the space of a whole year. From a European chronicle set down around 1000 AD, when astronomers have now demonstrated that the Taurid meteor system was particularly prominent around 1000 AD. The heavens having opened, a kind of burning torch fell upon the earth, leaving behind it a long train of light similar to a flash of lightning. Such was its light that it frightened not only those who were in the open country, but those who were within doors. As this opening in the heavens slowly closed, men saw with horror the figure of a dragon, whose feet were blue and whose head seemed continually to increase.
What do you think the scientific rationale would explain that zipping up and out of the heaven? What's actually happening scientifically?
Well, I think you're probably seeing a wave, maybe something akin to very constant. You know how when you look out over a paved surface, when it's real hot and you see the waves of heat coming off of it? I think it may be a phenomena akin to that you have this superheating of the atmosphere and you have this heat wave that's moving out, almost like two waves moving out from the path of this thing, passing through. As this super hot object is passing through the atmosphere, it's heating the air, and it's also pushing it sideways and literally creating almost like the train, like picture a power boat going through the water with the wave train coming off behind it. That's what it's doing. And these things are moving out, and I think it probably, the pressure and the heat is enough to create optical effects in the atmosphere.
It would probably slice through clouds too, so that
Sure.
it would separate, there would be a path.
Sure. But what they're describing here, you'll read those kind of accounts over and over again. We saw the broom stars in China because there the comet was the broom star because the comet came through and swept away the old order of things. This is one of the most interesting things in comet lore is the Ma Wangdui silk. And what it is, it's an ancient Chinese textbook of cometary forms and the various disasters, descriptions of the disasters that they would provoke. And when you go through and you begin to study these forms, it's quite interesting. But here's several of them here. Particularly notice the one that looks like a swastika. Turns out that the swastika may be a very universal ancient symbol for a spinning cometary nucleus, because it is known that when comets will, for example, come within the Earth's gravitational field, they might start rotating. It might induce a rapid rotation. As they're devolatilizing, they're spewing out jets. Sagan, in his book on comets, actually has a photograph of a spinning comet nucleus spewing out jets of gases. And what does it look like? It looks like a swastika. And here is an Iron Age spear, which was probably made out of meteoritic iron, because the earliest iron artifacts were made out of meteoritic iron. And you see what's inscribed on there? These various forms of swastikas. Remember, spears and swords, one of the most common symbols and emblems to represent comets and fireballs, along with brooms, torches. Oftentimes carrying torches in ceremonies may have actually represented a comet.
Would a meteor spear, iron spear, be more strong than a regular iron line?
Not necessarily, no, not necessarily. But the meteorite iron was probably the first available, particularly if earlier man was living during times of enhanced activity. It's possible that they would have witnessed falls from, because a lot of ancient cultures, for example, one of the most prominent known is the pre-Islamic culture that put a meteor stone at the Kaaba, and you know, basically when they do their pilgrimage to Mecca and they're making a circumambulation, what they're doing is they're circumambulating a piece of cosmic debris that fell to Earth that was held to be sacred. That's a very prominent example, but many cultures all around the world venerated meteors and used meteors in their rituals. The Hopis used coincide, which is the shocked quartz that was produced in the tremendous heat and explosion of the Arizona crater. They would collect that coincide, which is this shocked quartz that was created during the intense heat of and pressure of the explosion, and they use it in their ceremonies. And I'm not sure what they use it for, and I don't know if they still do, but they did. They were still doing that in the 1950s. They would go there and they would collect the shocked quartz from the Arizona meteor crater, and they were using it in their ceremonies. And they actually had a name for the god, the fiery god that fell from the sky to produce that. And of course, this image of the falling god that we've encountered repeatedly, now I'm suggesting is associated with the very same thing. Another thing that we noticed through a lot of the literature, and I'm not going to show you multiple examples, I'm only going to show you single examples, just so you can see the connections. This is something we find here. In the same year, in the month of March, stars were seen falling from the heavens so that all the beholders imagined that the end of the world had come. There was also a great drought, and the fountains dried up. Now this is rather interesting in the light of the fact that we've been in a drought. But I'm suggesting we don't have a scientific rationale for it, but the traditional accounts and literatures are so replete with these connections between the fall of meteors and bolides and meteor showers and the weather events that one wonders whether there may not be a cause and effect relationship. And I think it's highly likely, personally.
Could we have had one fall in the ocean that wasn't big enough to cause a tsunami and nobody noticed?
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
could that be the cause of?
I don't know about that.
Possibly.
Maybe. I don't know. I think that the question is pretty much wide open at this point. Another thing that's quite frequently associated is this year there was a fall of stars during the night preceding the first day of the month Jomadi 2, which continued from the beginning of the night until dawn. At the same period, earthquakes were felt in all parts of the world. Now, it's very possible that an account like this, again, the Tunguska object showed us that the object doesn't even have to strike the ground to cause earthquakes. If the Earth is being peppered by a meteor shower and there is actually stuff striking the ground, one should expect there to be earthquakes. But quite frequently through the literature, one sees repeatedly the meteor showers associated with earthquakes. In the same year appeared signs in the heavens among the stars, which appeared some falling, others blazing like torches. So they saw a lot of them were blazing like torches. Here again, look, in the year 323 of Hegira, several violent shocks of an earthquake were felt in Egypt. And about the same time, many of those meteors called falling stars of a very remarkable kind likewise appeared in Egypt. Like I said, there are many examples of this tying together activity in the heavens with some kind of a related activity on Earth. Elizabeth.
There's a connection between eclipses and earthquakes. Could eclipses draw in more meteors? In some.
That's an interesting line of thought. And certainly eclipses could trigger earthquakes simply because of the fact that now you have the combined gravitational mass of the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon on the same side, perhaps inducing just enough increased stress to cause slippage along fault lines. I'm going to skip past this one, but interesting comments from NASA's website talking about comets in ancient cultures and, harbinger of doom, menace of the universe. They've been regarded both as omens of disasters and messengers of the gods, which is interesting because they have this bifold nature. And this is, again, very, very common, found amongst ancient accounts, is that they look at them, that they had like a good side and a bad side. The bad side, of course, was that they could come in and cause devastation in the end of the world, harbingers of doom. On the good side, there was a belief that certain kinds of comets could cause, for example, the crops to grow abundantly. And there we get to some evidence from Tunguska, which has come out since the thawing of the Cold War, that Soviet scientists have been doing about the enhanced fertility of a lot of the things that have grown in the blast area.